In the bustling streets of Accra, Ghana, where tradition and modernity blend seamlessly, there lived a woman whose presence captivated all who encountered her. Her name was Ifya, a figure of enigmatic beauty and grace, yet shrouded in mystery. She appeared out of nowhere one day, seamlessly blending into the vibrant city life, but always maintaining an air of distance that intrigued and confounded those around her. No one knew where Ifya came from, nor did they know her true intentions. She carried herself with an elegance that suggested a noble lineage, yet she spoke little of her past. Her eyes, dark and piercing, seemed to hide 1,000 secrets, drawing people in but never fully revealing what lay beneath. Whispers followed her wherever she went, rumors of wealth, power, and a dangerous past. But despite her allure, there was something unsettling about Ifya. The way she moved through the city, always alone, always observing, yet never fully participating. People speculated about her identity. Was she a wealthy heiress hiding from the world? A spy from a distant land? Or something far more sinister? Ifya's presence in the city would soon set off a chain of events that no one could have predicted. Her arrival was not just a coincidence, it was the beginning of a story filled with scandal, intrigue, and a dark secret that would shake the foundations of those who dared to get close to her. The first person to truly notice Ifya was Kwame, a successful businessman known for his charm and ruthlessness. Kwame had built his empire from the ground up, and nothing escaped his attention. When he first saw Ifya at an exclusive charity gala, he was immediately drawn to her. Unlike the other women who vied for his attention, Ifya seemed indifferent to the wealth and power that surrounded her. Kwame was intrigued. He made it his mission to learn more about this mysterious woman who had captured his interest. He approached her that evening, his usual confidence intact, but Ifya's response was unexpected. She looked at him with those deep, unreadable eyes and simply smiled, a smile that sent a shiver down his spine. Their conversation was brief, and Ifya excused herself before Kwame could learn anything substantial. But that brief encounter was enough to ignite his curiosity. He began asking around, trying to gather information about her, but no one seemed to know much. The more elusive she became, the more determined Kwame was to uncover her secrets. Kwame's obsession with Ifya grew as the days passed. He found himself thinking about her constantly, unable to shake the feeling that there was something extraordinary about her. He began orchestrating chance encounters, making sure he was wherever she was. But Ifya remained elusive, always polite but never giving him more than a fleeting moment of her time. Kwame was not used to being ignored, and his frustration only fueled his desire. He decided to take a more direct approach. He invited Ifya to dinner at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, a place where deals were made and power was displayed. To his surprise, she accepted the invitation. That night, as they sat across from each other in the dimly lit restaurant, Kwame laid on the charm. He spoke of his successes, his ambitions, and his admiration for her. Ifya listened quietly, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but commanding, cutting through the superficiality of the conversation. "I've heard of you, Kwame," she said. "A man who gets what he wants. But tell me, what is it that you truly desire?" Kwame was taken aback by her directness. He had expected the usual game of flirtation, but Ifya was playing a different game, one that he was not entirely sure he understood. But Kwame was not a man to back down. He leaned in, his voice low and intense. "I want you," he said. "I want to know everything about you." Ifya's lips curved into a smile, but it was a smile that held no warmth. "Be careful what you wish for, Kwame," she replied. "Some secrets are best left buried." That night marked the beginning of a torrid affair, one that would consume Kwame completely. But what he did not realize was that in pursuing Ifya, he was walking into a trap, one that would have devastating consequences. As Kwame and Ifya's relationship deepened, Kwame found himself increasingly obsessed with her. He showered her with gifts, took her on extravagant trips, and introduced her to his inner circle. But despite his efforts, Ifya remained an enigma. She never spoke of her past, and any attempts to pry were met with gentle deflection. Kwame's friends and business associates began to notice the change in him. The once ruthless and focused businessman was now distracted and consumed by his infatuation. They warned him to be careful, but Kwame dismissed their concerns. He was convinced that Ifya was the woman he had been searching for all his life. But as time went on, strange things began to happen. Kwame's business deals started to fall through, his once loyal employees began to betray him, and rumors of scandal began to circulate. It was as if a dark cloud had settled over his life, and no matter what he did, things kept getting worse. Kwame started to suspect that someone was out to destroy him. He became paranoid, lashing out at those around him, including Ifya. But Ifya remained calm, always there to comfort him, even as his world crumbled around him. One night, after a particularly disastrous day, Kwame confronted Ifya, demanding to know what she was hiding. But instead of answering, Ifya simply looked at him with those inscrutable eyes and said, "You brought this on yourself, Kwame. You wanted to know my secrets, and now you're paying the price." Kwame was stunned. He had never heard Ifya speak like this before. But before he could respond, Ifya stood up and walked out, leaving him alone with his thoughts. It was then that Kwame realized the truth. Ifya was not who she appeared to be. She was something far more dangerous, a force that had been unleashed upon him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Desperate to understand what was happening, Kwame began to dig into Ifya's past. He hired private investigators, scoured records, and questioned anyone who might know something about her. But every lead he followed seemed to end in a dead end. It was as if Ifya had never existed before she appeared in Accra. One night, after weeks of searching, Kwame received a phone call from one of his investigators. The man had found something, a small village far from the city where people claimed to know a woman who matched Ifya's description. But what they told him was more horrifying than anything Kwame could have imagined. Ifya, it turned out, was not an ordinary woman. She was believed to be a witch, a powerful sorceress who had been exiled from her village years ago. The villagers spoke of strange occurrences and unexplained deaths that had followed her wherever she went. They believed that Ifya had made a pact with dark forces, and that anyone who crossed her path was doomed. Kwame was skeptical at first, refusing to believe in such superstitions. But as he thought back on everything that had happened since he met Ifya, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was some truth to the villagers' stories. The signs were all there, the sudden misfortunes, the way people seemed to fall under her spell, and the darkness that seemed to follow her. Terrified, Kwame confronted Ifya once more, demanding to know the truth. Ifya was waiting for him in the grand living room of his mansion, seated gracefully on a velvet sofa, her eyes calm and unreadable as always. Kwame stood before her, trembling with a mix of fear and anger, the weight of the villagers' words heavy on his mind. "Who are you, really?" Kwame's voice cracked with desperation. "I know what they say about you. Are you some kind of witch? Have you cursed me?" Ifya gazed at him, her expression unchanging. "Kwame," she began softly, her voice like a cool breeze on a sweltering day, "you were the one who sought me out. You were the one who couldn't resist. I never forced you to do anything. You wanted to know my secrets, and now you know some of them. But be careful, because knowledge can be dangerous. Especially for those who are not prepared to handle it." Her words sent a chill down Kwame's spine. He tried to hold his ground, but he could feel his resolve crumbling. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ifya rose gracefully from the sofa and walked slowly towards him. "I want nothing from you, Kwame. You have already given me everything, your trust, your love, your life." She paused, her eyes locking onto his, and for the first time, Kwame saw something in them that terrified him, a darkness, deep and ancient, something beyond human understanding. "You are right to fear me," Ifya continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But it is too late to turn back now. You chose this path, and you must see it through to the end." With that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving Kwame standing there, paralyzed by fear and confusion. He wanted to run after her, to demand answers, but his feet felt like they were rooted to the floor. The realization hit him like a blow: there was no escaping Ifya. She had ensnared him completely, and there was no way out. That night, Kwame couldn't sleep. He lay awake, his mind racing with thoughts of what he had learned. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how completely he had fallen into Ifya's trap. His life, his empire, everything he had built was crumbling around him, and he was powerless to stop it. But the worst part was that he still couldn't bring himself to let go of her. Despite everything, he was still drawn to her, like a moth to a flame. He knew she was dangerous, possibly even evil, but he couldn't resist. Ifya had become his obsession, his addiction, and he knew that it would be the death of him. Days turned into weeks, and Kwame's life continued to unravel. His business was on the verge of collapse, his friends had abandoned him, and his once pristine reputation was in tatters. Everywhere he turned, he encountered resistance, betrayal, and misfortune. It was as if the world itself had turned against him. Ifya, on the other hand, seemed untouched by the chaos that surrounded Kwame. She moved through the ruins of his life with the same grace and poise that had first drawn him to her. And though she remained by his side, she offered no comfort, no solace. Instead, she watched him with those inscrutable eyes, as if waiting for something, waiting for him to reach his breaking point. Kwame tried to fight back, to regain control of his life, but it was a losing battle. Every move he made seemed to push him deeper into the abyss. And all the while, Ifya was there, a silent witness to his downfall. One night, as Kwame sat alone in his darkened office, staring at the stack of unpaid bills and foreclosure notices, he realized the truth. There was no escaping his fate. Ifya had not just ruined his life, she had claimed it. And the only way out was to confront her, to demand the answers that he had been too afraid to seek. Driven by desperation, Kwame stormed into the bedroom where Ifya was sitting by the window, her face illuminated by the pale moonlight. "Tell me the truth, Ifya," he demanded, his voice shaking with anger. "Why are you doing this to me? What do you want from me?" Ifya turned to face him, her expression serene, as if she had been expecting this moment. "I want you to understand, Kwame," she said softly. "You are not the victim here. You brought this upon yourself. You wanted power, wealth, control over others, and you were willing to sacrifice anything to get it. But there is always a price to pay. You have paid it, and now your time is up." Kwame's heart pounded in his chest as he listened to her words. He realized that Ifya was not just a woman, she was something far more powerful, far more dangerous. She was the embodiment of everything he had feared, everything he had tried to control, and she had come to collect the debt he owed. "You can't do this," Kwame whispered, his voice trembling. "I won't let you." Ifya smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "It's too late, Kwame. You made your choice long ago. And now you must face the consequences." With that, she stood up and walked towards him, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Kwame backed away, terror flooding his veins, but there was nowhere to go. Ifya reached out and touched his forehead, and in that moment, Kwame felt his entire world shatter. Everything went dark. When Kwame awoke, he found himself lying on the cold, hard floor of his once luxurious mansion. The room was in shambles, the furniture overturned, and the walls cracked and crumbling. He struggled to his feet, his body aching and his mind reeling from the events of the previous night. As he stumbled through the ruins of his home, he realized that Ifya was gone. There was no trace of her, no sign that she had ever been there. But the damage she had done was all too real. Kwame's life was in ruins, and he knew that there was no way to rebuild it. He had lost everything, his wealth, his power, his friends, and he was alone. Despair washed over him as he realized the full extent of his downfall. Ifya had been right, he had brought this upon himself. His ambition, his greed, his desire for control had led him down a path of destruction, and now he was paying the price. In the weeks that followed, Kwame's life continued to spiral downward. His business was seized by creditors, his mansion was auctioned off, and he was left with nothing. The once powerful businessman was now a shadow of his former self, wandering the streets of Accra with no purpose, no direction. But even in his lowest moments, Kwame couldn't forget Ifya. She haunted his thoughts, her enigmatic smile and those piercing eyes always lingering in the back of his mind. He knew that she was out there somewhere, watching him, waiting. And so, Kwame lived out his days in obscurity, a broken man who had once had everything and lost it all. He became a cautionary tale, a story whispered in the streets of Accra about the man who had been destroyed by a mysterious woman, a woman who had come into his life and taken everything from him. But the truth was even more unsettling. Ifya had not just taken his wealth and power, she had taken his soul. And as Kwame wandered through the city, a hollow shell of the man he once was, he knew that he would never be free of her. Ifya had marked him, and he would carry that mark for the rest of his days. Ifya, her figure almost imperceptible, blending into the shadows of a nearby alley. Her eyes glow faintly, watching Kwame as he walks by, her presence a haunting reminder of the torment she has left him with. The atmosphere is somber, with a sense of despair and inevitability as Kwame trudges onward, oblivious to the life bustling around him. Years passed, and the legend of Kwame and Ifya became a story told in hushed tones, a cautionary tale for the ambitious and the greedy. Kwame had faded into obscurity, a forgotten man who had once commanded respect and power but was now just a memory, a ghost of his former self. In a small, dilapidated apartment on the outskirts of Accra, Kwame lived out his final days. His once sharp mind had dulled, and his body had grown frail. He spent most of his time staring out the window, lost in thoughts of what could have been, haunted by the choices he had made. The whispers of Ifya's presence never left him, a constant reminder of the life he had destroyed. On the day of his death, the sky was overcast, casting a grey pall over the city. As Kwame took his final breath, he saw her, Ifya, standing at the foot of his bed. She hadn't aged a day, her beauty as mesmerizing and terrifying as ever. She said nothing, only smiled that enigmatic smile that had drawn him in so many years ago. And then, as the light faded from Kwame's eyes, she leaned in close and whispered in his ear, "You are free now, Kwame. But remember, I am always with you." As Kwame's spirit left his body, he felt a cold, terrifying presence around him. He was no longer afraid, there was nothing left to fear. He was beyond life, beyond pain, beyond everything except her. Ifya had claimed his soul, and now they were bound together for eternity. Kwame's story became just another ghostly tale in the vast tapestry of human existence, a reminder that some decisions carry a price that can never be paid in full. And somewhere in the shadows, Ifya moved on, seeking her next victim, her next story. For she was not just a woman, she was a curse, a force of nature that could never be tamed, never be stopped. Long after Kwame's death, the story of Ifya continued to circulate in the underbelly of Accra. She had become an urban legend, a ghostly figure said to haunt those who dared to let greed and ambition consume them. Men and women alike were warned to beware the mysterious beauty who could appear out of nowhere, offering the world but demanding your soul in return. Some claimed to have seen her, a beautiful woman with eyes that could pierce through your soul. Others spoke of strange occurrences, business deals that went wrong, families torn apart, and lives shattered, all after encountering a woman who fit Ifya's description. But no matter how many times the story was told, one thing remained constant: the sense of unease that followed. Those who heard the tale could not shake the feeling that they were being watched, that somewhere in the shadows, Ifya was listening, waiting. And so, the legend of Ifya lived on, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the price one must pay when they allow their desires to cloud their judgment. For in the end, Ifya was not just a woman, she was a force, a manifestation of the darkness that resides in every soul. And she would continue to roam the earth, searching for those who were weak enough to fall into her trap, ensnaring them in a web from which there was no escape. I hope you enjoyed and learned something from this story. Please kindly like the video, comment your thoughts, and please subscribe for more enchanting tales. Thank you.